Well, good morning. Welcome to worship here at Grace Presbyterian Church. We're so glad that you can join us today, and welcome to those who are watching online. We're also glad that you are with us as we worship God together. So a hearty welcome to all of you. It's so great to see you and be with you and worship with you. As we begin, there are some announcements that we just have, and so we'll share those with you. So a number of things in the bulletin, and the bulletin is available online. So if you are tuning into our service, you can find our bulletin at Grace's website. But there are a number of things to just remind you of. So great to see everybody and to see you in masks. We'll be in masks for the day, and so just invite you to remain and be comfortable in your mask as we worship together. You'll see that there are a number of things in the bulletin around how we're going to be doing worship for a while, and we're just really we're taking COVID seriously, taking the rise of the numbers seriously, and so we just invite you to join us and care for community together as we follow these guidelines. So please just be aware of those things. There are a couple of parts in today's service that you're going to be invited to respond to, and those parts are in bold in the bulletin. So you'll see in the call to worship, there's responsive reading. The Lord's Prayer, there's responsive reading. We'll remain seated for hymns today, but you're welcome to follow along with the words in the hymns. The choir will lead the hymns, but you're welcome to follow along with the words in the bulletin. And if you want to hum or just sing quietly to yourself, that's okay as well. So we're kind of moving in a direction, and so hope that we can sing together in the near future. There are a number of things coming up at Grace that we want you to be aware of. And so the first one is Cake Bake. And so we'll be doing Cake Bake. And so if you want to read about that, it's in the bulletin. If you're a little nervous about Cake Bake or have some anxiety around COVID, we totally understand that. And so there are ways to be involved. without being present. And one of those ways is to support Cake Bake. So you can pray for our Cake Bake team. You can make a donation to Cake Bake if you want. And so just invite you to check out that information. Coming up in a couple of weeks, on Sunday, September 26th, out on the front steps, we're going to be having a community service of lament that's called 7 Generations, Stories and Our Lament. Many of you know that we have red paint on our front doors, and we've chosen to leave that up as a way of creating conversation around truth, healing, and reconciliation or reconciliation. And so I invite you to check out the information about the 7 Generations Stories in Our Lament service that's coming up and be a part of this. This is important work. It's right in front of us. There's also going to be following that a blanket exercise. And so if you're interested in participating in the blanket exercise, you can sign up on Grace's website. And so I invite you to do that. So if you want to learn more about the blanket exercise and find out more about it, there's a little bit in the bulletin, and there's more on Grace's website as well. A couple of other things just to draw your attention to. Certificate in Missional Leadership. It's a great course. It's offered through St. Andrew's Hall. You can sign up to be a part of that, and we really encourage that. So information in the bulletin. We're welcoming back Amy Dunn Moscoso, who is serving as our communications coordinator, and so we're so glad that Amy is back. And we're welcoming Ethan Kim to the facilities team. So maybe you saw Ethan if you came through the doors at the kind of chapel end of Grace. So welcome Ethan, welcome Amy. We're so glad that you're here. We're grateful, and so we just want to share thanks to those who serve on the 8 committees of session. Your work is important, it's valued, so please know that. Maybe you've driven past the church on Tuesdays or Thursdays and you've seen a booth out in the parking lot. We have a booth of community care, and we're looking for volunteers. And so if that is something that you're interested in engaging with people from the community, please contact Cindy as the coordinator of volunteers. A couple of other things just to let you know of. Grace Kids is online right now, and we're doing that for a while. And so we're always looking for people who are wanting to share the good news of the gospel and interact with kids. And so online right now. And so if you're interested in that, again, contact Cindy. It's a great way to get involved and to think about your faith and be involved in that. So as we gather together, we also recognize in a spirit of truth and healing and reconciliation, as well as in a spirit of peace, that we honor and acknowledge the traditional treaty 7 territories and the oral traditions of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, as well as the Stoney Nakoda and the Tsuut'ina nations. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historic Northwest Métis homeland. And let's acknowledge, too, that all this land is ancestral land. And we can acknowledge all nations, indigenous and non, who live, work, and play here, and who honor and celebrate this place that we call our home. So we gather together. And one other special announcement, Mary Lil, happy birthday. So friends, as we prepare our hearts and minds for worship, let us join in a centering prayer and welcome Christ's presence as we light the Christ candle. So I invite you to just take a breath, center yourself, be present with what you are thankful for this morning. Lord, direct our steps, turning us towards your grace. Allow our strength and purpose to come from you. Amen. Friends, I invite you to join me in our responsive call to worship this morning. Come, people of God, worship the one who listens to our prayers. We will worship the one who hears us. Come, people of God, worship the one who watches over us. We will worship the one who cares deeply for us all. Come, people of God, worship the one who invites us into life. We will offer thanks and praise to the one who gives us life. Our opening hymn this morning is God Bless Your Church with Strength. So let us reflect on these words as we listen to them and hum them and sing them together.
Please join me in our prayers of adoration and confession, and you'll notice that our prayer of confession today is in bold, so I invite you to pray that with me as well. Living God, artist of the changing skies, builder of the earth, lively Christ, born to walk life's journey with us. Spirit of life, always moving in us and among us. Your presence surrounds us here and everywhere we go. Your purpose holds the world in its place. Your imagination engages us each step of the way. In our time of worship, show us how we can serve you and open our imaginations to the future you create. We seek your guidance and your grace now and always. Amen. God of time and eternity, we confess that we have long memories, especially for things that hurt us, for moments we resent or regret. Week by week, we seek your forgiveness for our mistakes, but we confess we do not forgive others so faithfully. Sometimes we seek opportunity to even the score. Confront us with your mercy, O God, and open our hearts to its cleansing power. Amen. The Lord is compassionate, the Lord is gracious and slow to anger, and abounding in love. And with this love, may we learn to forgive others, knowing that God always forgives us. Amen. And now we'll have our second hymn, Open Your Ears, O Faithful People, and I invite you to remain seated. Our scripture reading today is Psalm 33. This is a song of praise. So as we read it, it would only make sense to include a little bit of singing. It has the words, "Sing unto the Lord a new song." So the choir will lead us in a refrain as we read it. As you catch on to the refrain, feel free to hum along as it comes in, but listen now for the word of the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous. Praise befits the upright. Praise the Lord with the lyre. Make melody to him with the harp of 10 strings. Sing to him a new song. Play skillfully on the strings with loud shouts. For the word of the Lord is upright, and all his work is done in faithfulness. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. of the Lord the heavens were made, and all their host by the breath of his mouth. He gathered the waters of the sea as in a bottle. He put the deeps in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the thoughts of his heart to all generations. Happy is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people whom he has chosen as his heritage. The Lord looks down from heaven. He sees all humankind. From where he sits enthroned, he watches all the inhabitants of the earth. He who fashions the hearts of them all and observes all their deeds. A king is not saved by his great army. A warrior is not delivered by his great strength. The war horse is a vain hope for victory, and by its great might it cannot save. Truly the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and shield. Our heart is glad in him because we trust in his holy name. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you. So for the time being, we won't be inviting anyone up to the front for our time with young Christians, but we hope that in the coming weeks that could change. And as Jake already mentioned, our Grace kids are meeting online before worship, and our Grace youth are meeting online for the time being in the evening on Sunday. So some of our community have already worshiped together today. And so I just wanted to share a paraphrase meant for all ages of our scripture today. And then a part of our worship with our kids this morning was a blessing to go back to school. So we blessed our children as they started on that new fall journey. And so I want to share that prayer with us today as well, so you can enjoy it. And I'm sure a lot of you some of you have started the back to school stuff already. Some of you may know people who have, and so that prayer is for all those today. But first, Psalm 33, dance, sing, and shout. I clap my hands, I stamp my feet, I dance with my whole body, I dance. I sing with my whole heart, I sing. I sing a brand new song from the top of my lungs because you are wonderful. And I shout, I yell, I shout and declare your name because you are mighty. I beat my drum, I play the cymbals, I blow a trumpet, I march up and down the yard, the street, the field. I sing my love songs to you. I rejoice in you because you are awesome. And while our picture's not very big, it's a really great parade that's happening. So I'll share that with you. And here's our special blessing and prayer for back to school. Bless my paper and my pen. Guide my spirit deep within. Help me think and help me play this whole school year day by day. As I move from class to class, guide my footsteps, clear my path. Keep my tongue to speak your words. Let your will for me be heard. In every subject, high or low, may God's excellence be shown. Keep me strong to reach the prize, to grow in grace, becoming wise. Whether far from home or near, may I hold God's precepts dear, to do my best at every task. For this blessing I do ask. Help my family be a part as I lift my mind and heart. As I study, work, and pray, be with them throughout the day. Amen.
Today we're going to be having a message where myself and Reverend Marin and Reverend Christian will be speaking, so it'll be a bit of a conversation, and so just invite you into that conversation as we think and reflect on Psalm 33. Homecoming. Homecoming represents a movement towards what is familiar or known. In the town I grew up in, homecoming happened as the leaves on the trees showed fall colors. There was a parade, maybe a little bit like the picture that Marin just showed, and the community lined the streets to celebrate community and connection. But what happens when what is familiar or known is changed? Is slightly or significantly different. When I go home now, and it's been quite a while, what often jumps out to me is how what was once familiar has changed. The restaurant at the center of Main Street has changed. It used to be the Golden Glow Cafe, now it serves burgers. The person who smiled used to welcome me when I entered the church I grew up in is no longer there. I notice that I'm older. And places, even though they are known or familiar, they don't hold that same knownness or familiarity they once did, even when I have wanted them to remain the same. So what happens? What happens when what is familiar or known has changed, slightly or significantly? What happens when it's you and me who have changed? Just invite you to take a moment to think about the familiarity or knownness of Grace Presbyterian Church. Has it changed? And on a deeper level, let's take a moment to think about how our own familiarity and knownness has changed. Ponder this question. How have we changed in the time we have been away? Maybe you're looking at me and saying my hair is longer, but really, how have we changed? And if you want to take this to a deeper level and move to a point of introspection, take a moment to reflect on how you have changed over the past several months. What might be unfamiliar within you that you are recognizing? In thinking about this Sunday, Reverend Marin, Reverend Christian, and I talked about this idea. We've changed. Now what? What happens when we show up for homecoming, but the parade has already gone by, along with the realization that we too have changed? Now what? In many ways, I think things feel a bit muted by the surge in COVID numbers across Calgary and the province, muted by how fragmented life and community and understandings are, muted by the uncertainty of what's next, and muted by the understanding that even though there is a longing for the familiar, change has occurred. Take a moment to breathe in the truth that change has occurred. Reflect on the question, now what? I've been exploring articles that have been reflecting on the now what question, especially as it relates to the collective life together in church. Many of the thoughts shared in these articles are focused on why church can't be the same following the pandemic. Because a new reality is emerging as the church is reformed and always reforming. I think we like that reformed part, but that and always reforming part is a bit hard for us to swallow. There are still a number of questions to answer as the new reality is emerging. Yet some of the thoughts on the now what in regards to the collective life as a church are, there's going to need to be a redefined definition of belonging. And we need to extend that definition beyond attendance at in-person worship. The emerging reality is that participation of people who are not in the building on Sunday morning may surpass the number of people who are in this space on Sunday morning. Hi to those of you who are worshiping with us online. We know you're there. You belong. A large focus is going to be placed on connection. There is a need for small groups that help build thicker community through meaningful connection. And the majority of these groups will meet outside of this space, and at times different than Sunday morning. And I think the past months have really revealed some of the mistaken importance that we've given to always being on the go and busyness, as well as on consuming and consumerism being meaning-making in life. Now is the time to focus on inviting people to feel as though they belong and have a part in the story God has written and is writing. As stated earlier, it's not a time to obsess over getting people back into Grace's building. Rather, it is a time to help people connect with Grace's vision of life being transformed by grace. Grace's mission of growing in following Jesus and affecting social change and helping people live into Grace's values of belonging, community, compassion, engagement, and service. These changes, along with navigating an emerging and new reality, present a number of challenges. Yet we're not alone in seeking answers and understandings to the what's next questions. Friends, in the midst of the what's next questions that are going to come, We are invited to lean into the promise of God's presence and God's goodness. Yes, homecoming may be muted. We may have even missed the parade. Maybe it's already gone by. But we can recognize that we've changed. And we may be wrestling with how we've changed and what this change is. And it is here that the words of Psalm 33 remind us of God's goodness and God's movement and grace. These words are a welcomed help. And they're a welcomed help to us as we remember what it means to lean into and discern God's invitation around responding to the question of what's next.
Over the summer months, many Grace Church members gathered in the parking lot to celebrate communion together in small groups. And so we use this as an opportunity just to see each other face to face. But it was also the chance to pause at what felt like a midway point. Midway between I don't know what, but it just felt that way. But after so much time apart, dealing with the pandemic in a variety of ways, and as we look toward today, when we hoped that some of us would gather in person, it felt like time to pause and do some looking back before we did too much speaking about what the future may hold. So as part of these times, we reflected on the stone of help, otherwise known as an Ebenezer, set up by Samuel in the Old Testament. And when he sets this stone, he says, "Thus so far the Lord has helped us." So during communion, we reflected on where God had been our help over the last 16 months, or where we had seen God's faithfulness to us, and we wrote them on our own stones of help that looked like this. And I've gathered some of the ones we have lingering from our communion services together. Today we celebrate that faithfulness and the ways that God has been our present help. When we had originally talked about celebrating God's faithfulness today, we didn't realize where our city or province would be at with the pandemic. We didn't realize that fear or hesitation might still be very real in our lives. We thought that the celebration might feel a little more exciting, or as though we had reached some sort of milestone, but I know as we sit continuing to be spaced with masks on, it might not be how we feel now that we are here. Which is sort of life in a way as well. We get through one thing and we think we're in the clear, and then something else happens. Or we look ahead to something, and instead of being in the present, focus on a future moment or event, and then when it passes us by, it can feel somewhat empty again. But we celebrate God's faithfulness because it is constant. God's hopeful presence is constant. It follows us through the everyday, the ordinary, the lows, and the highs. And the words on all these stones of help are a testament to how God has been faithful in people's lives. And in our church community, there are many witnesses to God's faithfulness and presence. Our psalm today was a song of praise. It's a song of praise not meant for exciting moments of celebration or high points of the year, like back to in-person worship, but a song of praise for the everyday. It is meant to guide our thoughts and our hearts. It's meant to remind us of the reality that God is in our lives and that God's presence permeates our every circumstance. God is great and God is good. What is the difference that God's presence, faithfulness, and redemption has made in your life? And I love how this psalm ends. After all the praise and the grand statements about who God is, what God is like, and what God has done, it ends with what I read as a gentle, peaceful call to living our lives. Our soul waits for the Lord. The psalm of praise is not only for the moment. It's not an acknowledgement of how great God has been. Now let's get back to our lives until we need God again. It's meant to propel us forward in faith. It's meant to help us turn ourselves and our being toward God in hope and faith. Yes, it's a psalm about celebrating and praising God, but not as a one and done. God, you are great and good, and we know it, yet we continue to wait on you. Homecoming Sunday, as Jake said, may feel somewhat muted or not like how we hoped it would, but God has been faithful and will continue to be as we approach these coming months. Things have changed, but instead of yearning for an ideal future, we can learn together how to dwell in the present with one another, with the gifts of each day, with the learnings of each yesterday, witnessing to God's faithfulness and help in our everyday lives. We celebrate God's faithfulness today, but at the same time, we continue to wait. We continue to look to God, knowing that we don't need to hold everything in our own hands alone, and knowing that in this waiting, we may be filled with strength, and that in the midst of losses, sorrows, joys, or celebrations, God's presence permeates our every circumstance. So let's remember Samuel's words in these coming months and claim them as ours. Thus, so far, the Lord has helped us.
So we've heard some of the ways the past year has shaped us, as well as the ways that God has been faithful to us. And I'll be speaking about what happens now. Where do we go from here? In as much as God has been faithful to us, let's remember the primacy of us being faithful to God. How are we living out the calling placed on us, Grace Presbyterian Church? In order to have an idea of how to answer that, we need to be aware of what our calling is, so we can determine, are we living it? Are we working towards it? Fundamentally, I believe all churches are called to discipleship and making disciples. But what is the call placed on Grace Presbyterian that is different from the call placed on other churches and congregations? My vocation may be different from yours, but we are all trying to live out our calling, using the spiritual gifts given to us in the service of God and one another. Similarly, just as many of us have different gifts and callings, we are called to serve the same triune God. What is the call that God has placed upon Grace that is different from a church around the corner or another Presbyterian church in the city? We're going to be spending a significant amount of time discerning. Over the next 4 weeks, the sermons will look at discernment from a different perspective, in the sense that it takes time, draws us into community, transforms us, and leads us to gratitude. Over the weekend, a number of leaders at Grace, including committee conveners, service, session, and teaching elders, and staff, took hours of their time to do some strategic planning and to begin discerning about Grace's calling and ministry. On Friday, Reverend Dr. Gordon Smith, president of Ambrose University here in Calgary, spoke to us about the particularity of God's call, potential obstacles to discernment, and the courage to act with a hopeful optimism. I'll admit I was a bit reluctant to spend a Friday night on Zoom, but I did not regret it in the least. It was eye-opening and hopeful. I won't recap everything that Reverend Dr. Smith said, but I think it's worth mentioning a few points. In trying to identify the particularity of the call of God, we have to acknowledge the specifics of our situation. In other words, we need to name our reality. Doing this means avoiding if only talk. Like, if only we had a lead minister, if only COVID didn't happen, if only the young people were coming to church. This isn't helpful. It might be nostalgic to think back about Grace's glory years or golden years, but this isn't where we find ourselves now. Our calling 50 years ago is not the same as our calling today. We need to state what actually is and move forward. We don't have a lead minister because Nick resigned. There is a vacancy for associate minister, pastoral care, following Jean's departure. We live in a post-Christendom society and find ourselves no longer at the center. What is our calling in 2021? I think I have a pretty good tolerance for conflict. Thinking back on my life, there are probably a number of reasons for this. Growing up in a large family, living in a multicultural city with people from a number of backgrounds, perspectives, and values, and even growing up in a church that churned out more ministers and saw changes in membership more frequently than one would expect. But I always felt tied to those communities. I love my family dearly. I'll always love Toronto and my home congregation of St. David's. The importance of what Reverend Dr. Gordon Smith described as not always agreeing, but routinely deferring, was regularly seen and lived out. And it's essential for us to remember this as grace. Being part of a faith community, of a denomination, and even a country is not about getting our way all the time. We have a voice, but we're not called to use that voice to undercut the capacity of the collective to do what it is being called to do. There's a federal election underway. I think you can still take part in advanced polling. There have been decisions made at the national level of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. How is Grace discerning our calling? How is Grace, the Presbyterian Church, the nation of Canada, responding to the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission? Now, there were many things that were done to discern in our recent past. How to engage with young adults, children and youth. How do we make children feel welcome at communion? And there are a number of things to continue discerning going forward, including discerning the calling God has placed on Grace. There's no doubt the past year has changed us, and there's no doubt that God has been faithful to Grace. The question for us is, how do we respond? How do we discern what being faithful to God's calling in our congregational life looks like? Stay tuned. Let's pray and explore it together over the coming weeks. Amen. Let me just take a few seconds to reflect as we prepare to listen to our next hymn, number 648, I'm Going to Live So God Can Use Me. Let us come before God once again in prayer. Please join me. Eternal God, we come before you in prayer, mindful that you are with us in all situations. You give strength and courage when we are anxious or afraid. You provide wisdom and direction when we face choices and challenges. We ask for wisdom as we discern how you are calling grace to serve you and your people at this time. Thank you for your faithfulness to us. May we be faithful to you and always place you first. Stir us so that we are concerned about the needs of the poor and marginalized more than we are concerned about the appearances of our building or our spreadsheets. Enlarge our love for you and for our neighbors so that we are serving the well-being of the world you love more faithfully. We pray for those experiencing difficulty and facing challenges of unemployment or financial insecurity. Give employers, unions, and leaders in government a vision that reflects the values of your kingdom so that all have their needs met. We remember those in pain, whether it be emotionally, spiritually, physically, or another form. We pray for healing in their lives. We've gone through much over the past year, and many of us still bear wounds, seen or unseen, from the events in our lives. Be with those who are grieving and comfort the brokenhearted. We give thanks for those who walk alongside of us in our journeys, reminding us that we are not alone, including our deacons and homebound visitors. We pray for people and places on our hearts and minds in silence now. We pray for all those facing famine and drought this year. Be with those agencies and groups that support people and who work to alleviate suffering. We pray for the work of PWS&D, for the impacts they have on so many lives and communities. Lord, in a world where many are divided by bitter conflicts, we give you thanks for those who work for peace and mercy. We pray for those who keep peace and lead negotiations in international disputes. Give them courage and perseverance. We remember those who face violence, persecution, or discrimination daily, and pray for all whose lives are marked by danger or upheaval. We pray for teachers, students, educational administrators, and support staff as another school year begins. Thank you for the gifts of education, for insight into this ever-changing world and the ability to distinguish truth from error. Grant those in education this year mutual respect and commitment to the shared venture of learning in a pandemic. We pray for those who experience barriers to learning and do not have adequate access to education, whether it be because of discrimination, financial need, poor systems in place, or another factor. And we remember and pray for the children who attended residential schools in Canada. We pray for those whose lives were lost and the pain inflicted on their families. We pray for those who continue to live, bearing much pain and suffering, and for their families who experience the effects of this pain and suffering. Help us to learn. Help us be open to the healing and reconciliation needed between the church and Indigenous peoples. We pray that the actions we work towards this month and the months ahead will promote and encourage healing. We pray all these things in the name of Jesus, who came that we might know true healing, and who taught his disciples to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Let us pray together. Generous God, we offer our gifts to you in thanksgiving, whether they be of time, of talent, or of treasure. Bless these gifts and the ministries they support, which enable many to know your love and grace. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. I'll ask Amir to come forward at this time. In praying for our time, talents, and treasures, thank you for your time. You can come forward. For taking the time out of your Sunday morning to attend worship in person, for those joining online to watch this service, for the quilters who took the time and their talents to make this quilt. You'll recall Amir was baptized here at Grace on August 8th. We had hoped that by September 12th we'd be able to have a warm welcome where we could get to know Amir better. Hopefully I would have had some cake and fellowship in the family room, but with the fourth wave, some of the celebrations and opportunities for engagement are muted. But we are so happy for the quilters for their time and talent who have made this quilt in recognition for your baptism, Amir. So here's a quilt I'm happy to present to you on behalf of Grace Presbyterian Church, along with the card. Thank you. Amir's attending school in Edmonton, so we ask for God's continued blessing and support in his educational journey. But Amir will be able to attend worship fairly regularly here in Calgary, so we look forward to hopefully at some point getting to have those more closer contacts and connect face to face, hopefully have some cake and refreshments when the time is suitable. But I do want to thank you all for coming out this morning. It's really nice to worship together. It's been quite a while. I might even get choked up a bit, but even having those congregational responses and hear us worshiping together as one voice, though many, is very special. So thank you. There's no pressure to attend in person if you're still feeling unwell or apprehensive or cautious about worshiping in person. But we are trying to do what we can and worship safely, as effectively as possible. So thank you for your support, for your cooperation, and for your presence here today. So before we go, let us have our blessing and benediction. Friends, we have changed over this past year as individuals and as a congregation, but God has been faithful to us. Let us remember our calling to be faithful to God as we go forward. May we be united in the Holy Spirit, renewed by our Savior Jesus Christ, and may we know that we are always loved by God. Amen.